By the way, talking of the gold that Brown sold, we've currently got about £5 billion worth of seized Bitcoin, and she's planning to sell all of that. And what I'm urging is, no, let's keep it, let's have the Bank of England, and let's start to build up and make Bitcoin a reserve category as well.
What's going on, guys? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a great day today. Now, the weekend was definitely nasty. We had the worst liquidation event ever in crypto history, right? A lot of positions got wiped out. Bitcoin looked like it was attempting to potentially fall below 100,000, and then we had a massive bounce back. You could see currently in the chart right here, we did bounce all the way back. On some exchanges, it was lower than 103,000, some hit 102, but what we are seeing is we had this resistance right here. This was sort of the neckline, right, for the original head and shoulders pattern that we had pointed out a while ago. You had your head, you had your two shoulders right here, and this blue neckline not only was acting as resistance, but we also find ourselves back inside this purple zone right here. So ultimately, really, Bitcoin is just range bound, attempting to break above this resistance again. We have been rejected so far 3 days off of this level, and the one thing that we were speaking about was we did have a CME futures gap that I had said there was a very good chance we were going to end up closing. So even though everyone was getting a little bit excited when Bitcoin was getting back up to around 116,000, this was a very likely scenario. But the good news is that we can actually get rid of that now because this gap has in fact been closed. And what's interesting is if we look at the futures right now, well, we're actually using, again, this resistance right here on the downwards trend as our potential support. Now, this is the daily. We obviously have a few hours left in the day to see if we end up closing above this, but it is quite interesting to see how we did in fact fill that gap and we are back above that level, almost as if nothing really happened, right? Although we know that clearly a lot actually happened for many people in the space, especially those that were high, not even high leverage, just really any leverage. A lot of the altcoins, right? They got hit pretty hard. But of course, you know, we do still have a CME futures gap at around 91,000. Now, obviously, the longer you take to close this, the less likely you're going to end up closing it. Will this end up being something that we close in the bear market? Or is this something that we're going to potentially see us close sooner than later? That I don't know. But there is something that might be a bit concerning, and I will get to that in just a minute, but just to sort of go over what's been happening, you could see that the S&P 500, for example, was in this rising wedge pattern, had one of its largest red candles. Clearly, I mean, no markets were unaffected by what happened last weekend, but you can see that it has recovered about half, a little bit more than half of those losses. So the markets are attempting to spring back again, right? If we have a look over here, if we look at these liquidations, the majority of them have still, in fact, been on the long side, but there are some shorts that have been getting wrecked as well. What was interesting was this morning, you had that insider whale that was actually building up a massive short position, but then as Jerome Powell came out and spoke just today, this afternoon, this insider whale now started closing all of their short positions. So do they know something that we don't, right? Now, just to talk about what had happened, it does look like Binance has launched a $400 million support initiative. So they are going to try to sort of give ticket vouchers to eligible users that had experienced liquidations. Additionally, they established a $100 million institutional support program to assist ecosystems and institutions that were severely affected. So clearly this was an internal issue. Now, I know there's been talk of manipulation. Look, we can throw everything that you want at the wall and just see what sticks. At the end of the day, there was clearly an internal issue, and we know that Binance provides a lot of liquidity to a lot of these different exchanges. A lot of people don't know that, but they do, okay? So a lot of this could have been sort of put on their shoulders, and I think they're feeling the heat for that. I do have to actually give a shout out, though, to Levex, because they were one of the few early exchanges to actually start reimbursing traders that did get sort of, you know, caught off sides in these weird liquidation cascades. So, you know, they were already starting to do that before Binance even announced it, which, you know, shout out to Levex again. If you guys want to check out their exchange below, they were, like I said, pretty much one of the first exchanges to actually start compensating users. So good on you, Levex. I think that's pretty cool, especially when you have these types of things that are unexpected out of left field and really are just not quite fair, right? Especially when you have stop losses that are not getting triggered. That's just completely unacceptable. But here is the kicker, guys. So Yes, my friends, the day has finally arrived. So if you are subscribed to the 4-year cycle, I was going to make this chart myself, but Mr. Crypto made a much clearer chart. So on average, these bear markets tend to last about a year. It's pretty wild. These bull markets have lasted about 1,064 days, give or take almost exactly to the top. And as of today marks the 1,064th day. We're right around that area. So if you believe in the 4-year cycle and these people have been calling for the 4-year cycle, well, then now is the time. Now is the time for the 4-year cycle people to be correct. And again, we don't know what's going to happen moving forward. Maybe it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies where you have a lot of people that are looking to sell off, right? Maybe these OGs that are offloading. But again, we've been trying to hammer in on this channel that it is a very different ball game than it has ever been before for Bitcoin. I will get back to this in a minute here, but talking about some of these things, if you just simply look at the this sort of decode macro trend oscillator that they've been looking at, you can definitely clearly say that although these are dangerous words, this time is in fact different, because a lot of these other oscillators, you've had very clear distinctions between when you've had these bears and when you've had this euphoria, and yet this cycle has been relatively flat. We really haven't seen euphoria stages, massive green. Really, we got to this little area, it looked like it was going to flip, and we ended up putting in sort of a double bottom on the red while price continues to go up, and we've only just started printing our first green. So, again, if this is the cycle top, it doesn't really look like a lot of the other cycle tops. Timothy Peterson said, having a look at this logarithmic trend line, it's actually right on the perfect opportunity for buying. If you want to look at it more in a parabolic way, this also could sort of show you the same exact thing. I had this pulled up right here, and what we were talking about was every single time Bitcoin came down to the bottom of this area, it signaled an amazing buy opportunity. And currently we're sitting there again. Now, I know that being at the lowest point of this upwards trend could create a lot of fear, because when you're really close to the bottom, you're very scared to buy at these levels because, what if we break it? What if we fall lower? What if we go to some of these lower Fibonacci levels? What if we go down to the 0.236 and now Bitcoin's $82,000? Well, obviously that's a risk that everybody has to take. But considering that this trend has been going since November 22nd, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 solid points that have pretty much shown you in the charts that this would be the time for buying. So again, not financial advice. Yeah, at some point these models have to break, right? But thus far, they haven't broken anything yet. In fact, like Tech Dev points out, it really could have never been the 4-year cycle. The 4-year cycle really refers more to the 4-year halving cycle, right? That's more of really what the 4-year cycle is that we know that every 4 years we have the Bitcoin halving, and generally speaking, around 8 months or so after the halving, we tend to see these explosive moves, right? And then we just sort of applied that as well because we had somehow also just happened to have these perfect market cycles, right? And it seemed like that was just the pattern that was going to keep playing out. But then we had the ETF step in. We had the big institutions, right? Bitcoin didn't quite move the way that it used to move. We haven't even seen a parabolic rally yet. It's just been stair step up, sideways and down, boring. Going up a little bit, making a new all-time high, down and boring, right? That's not really anything that we've seen at the end of a cycle for euphoria. And if you have a look at where we are right now, this is almost suggesting that we're back somewhere around what we were doing right here in 2016, right before. I don't know if you guys remember the 2017 rally. That was amazing. Bitcoin went from $1,000 to $20,000. It was literally a 20x, which is wild. And yeah, it kind of looks like we're more in that area. And hey, guys, on top of it, Jim Cramer says that he hopes money can be taken out of crypto and put into real economy stocks. So if you're a fan of the inverse Cramer, well, I'm not telling you what to do, but like Anthony Pompliano points out, the entire world was not predicting a stock market crash in 1929, 2000, or 2008. The more people predict it, the less likely it is to happen. Now, this isn't to say that somebody wasn't predicting it, right? Of course, there were people in 2008 that saw the writing on the wall, right? Warren Buffett, actually, I'll give him credit. He actually was one of them back then. And actually, Warren Buffett recently has come out and said that he doesn't see anything cheap right now and that he sees a massive recessionary type correction possibly in the next 5 years, right? But again, is that going to happen tomorrow? I would really beg to differ. I mean, you could just see when we had the misunderstanding between the US and China news, it kind of goes to show that although we may be having these conflicts, at the same time, none of these countries want their stock market to fall, especially Trump, right? They're going to try to do everything in their power to prop it up. Not to mention the fact that I don't have the clips because it literally, actually, it might even be still happening while I'm making this video. Powell was talking and he seemed pretty dovish. I mean, there's a 95% chance now of the 25 basis point cut, right? So, it's one of those scenarios where it's not exactly, you could say the 4-year cycle today, right, is happening. But at the same time, we've never seen these monetary conditions, during this quote unquote cycle end. That's all I'm saying. Again, I'll be happy to be wrong. I've been wrong before. It's just realistically, you're not seeing the same things. You're still seeing Bitcoin massively lagging on the M2 money supply. And they're only going to start pumping more in as time goes by. Not to mention that Elon Musk finally actually has said something about Bitcoin since they bought, I don't know how long it was, 2 years ago. Zero Hedge was like, if you want to know why gold, silver, and Bitcoin are soaring, it's the debasement to fund the AI arms race. Obviously, you need something to power all of this AI. And Elon Musk says true. That is why Bitcoin is based on energy. You can issue fake fiat currency, and every government in history has done so, but it's impossible to fake energy, right? And Bitcoin proof of work, remember Ethereum switched to proof of stake a while ago, so Bitcoin proof of work, it is backed by the energy consumption. It costs money to produce Bitcoin. It costs these miners money to run their operations. There is, in fact, value behind that. There is energy consumption, right? And you can't fake energy. You can fake money, right? But you can't fake energy, which is the point of this, right? You have to pay for it. Or, you have to find some, maybe you can use hydro or wind or something else, but at some point, someone's paying something somewhere, right? So there is inherent value. When people say Bitcoin has no inherent value, it does, okay? It has the value of the energy that was consumed in order to produce that Bitcoin, right? If we come over here, there is something, though, that is worth mentioning. And I haven't even drawn any line below this. So this is the dollar index. Now, although, it has been going up. I mean, if we zoom out, it's pretty much been on a free fall ever since back in 1985. The dollar just really hasn't been doing too well. It has its up and downs, but we are hitting a pretty critical support area for the dollar, right? So if the dollar does start to rally by some miracle, I'm not sure how that's going to pull that off, but if it does, that could be an issue short term for Bitcoin. Maybe then all the bears would be saying, see, I told you, the 4-year cycle is intact. But, what happens if we get up here around 100 and get rejected? If the dollar starts falling out of this uptrend, that could be really, really, really bad for the dollar specifically, but really, really, really good for things like Bitcoin and crypto, right? And, while everybody else is panicking about all this negativity, you have Larry Fink going on CNBC this morning. Now, keep in mind, BlackRock has $13 trillion in assets under management, and they just said that their Bitcoin ETF has now surpassed 100 billion with a B, dollars, okay? So this is the fastest growing ETF in history, and it just recently broke a milestone, even though we had all that madness happen over the weekend.
Our Bitcoin IBIT is now over $100 billion.
$100 billion, I know,
so
from nothing not that long ago.
And 2 years ago, zero.
Yeah,
so
I know. Well, you weren't always a huge proponent of crypto, as we know.
I love it now. But I grow and learn.
I heard you say that on 60 Minutes.
I did say that.
Jim?
And to come back to all that madness over the weekend, it's kind of crazy how only really people in crypto are talking about it. If you look at any of the major news publications like Wall Street Journal or something like that, nobody even mentioned it. Really, it was such an internal crypto thing. The other guys, they just went to sleep. They woke up, well, I guess Monday was a holiday, but they woke up today and what'd they do? They bought more. Tom Lee bought more. That's just what they do. They're coming in to scoop it up. And speaking of scooping it up, you had the U.S. Treasury seizing 127,000 Bitcoin worth $14 billion from Chinese pig butchering scam ring. I don't even know what that means. I don't even understand that. But this is sort of what they were saying about these budget neutral ways in which they could acquire Bitcoin, right? Now, I hope that they don't pull one of the gold, where they confiscated gold years ago. I hope they don't try to do that with Bitcoin. But this is a budget neutral way, and this is more potential to add to the United States Bitcoin strategic reserve, right? There is also the option to potentially sell some gold at some point. I know Cynthia Lummis has spoke about that in length. And the other thing you have to think about is, yes, you have a lot of the central banks that have been buying gold. That has clearly been happening, right? Gold, great year for gold. It's a great year for gold. I mean, I got to give it to it, but Bitcoin, I mean, so this year, Bitcoin has been not performing that well to gold. But if you take pretty much every other year in existence and you find the average, I mean, there's no real question about it. But what you're seeing now is not just central banks looking into gold, obviously countries looking into gold, but you're also seeing sovereigns start to look into Bitcoin. And we actually have some evidence of that.
We have countries, sovereigns, starting to do allocations. We have just announced Kazakhstan working with Binance Kazakhstan, starting their own strategic reserve on that front. So we have different countries approaching us by virtue of the depth of our marketplace, right? So you have countries approaching us. So we see that huge uptake, and institutionalization has started to happen, and happens at a quite rapid pace, right?
In fact, like I was telling you guys, I do speak with some OTC desks who need to deal with these clients who want to buy a lot of Bitcoin, but they don't want to move the price, right? Because that's going to affect their purchase. And, they are saying that they've been speaking to some nations as well. Of course, I can't give any names, but these are things that you're hearing in the background. You have Van Eck saying that possibly by 2050, you could have Bitcoin hitting $3 million if you have central banks at just 2% weight.
We have a model that assumes that by 2050, this is very long term, that Bitcoin becomes a reserve asset that's used in global trade and held by global central banks at a very modest 2% weight. And in that model, we arrive at a $3 million price target for Bitcoin. Now, that sounds, extreme, but that's a 16% compound annual growth rate for a couple decades. That's not really that extreme. So into the millions over the medium term is a high conviction call.
And I know that sounds like an absolute crazy number, $3 million. It does. $1 million sounds crazy, right? But $100,000 sounded crazy just a couple of years ago. And the idea of people panicking, Bitcoin going from 125 back down to 100 is pretty wild. I mean, that we used to joke about that. Like, we would post tweets like back when Bitcoin was like 20,000 or 30,000, we would post tweets about, Bitcoin crashes from 125 down to 100. Ha ha ha. And people are like, oh, and now it's happening. It's reality. It's wild. It's wild times that we're living through. ARK Invest thinks we could go to 3.8 million.
You're projecting in 5 years, Bitcoin hits 3.8 million per coin. That's 5 times the market cap of gold, which has hit an all-time high. Walk us through the math here.
So I'm going to just correct that a bit. So,
okay.
Our official for bull case is 1.5 million.
Okay.
Now, what got us to that 3.8 is using modern portfolio theory. If we were to include Bitcoin in portfolios at its optimal weight, so maximizing the Sharpe ratio, that would have provided that increment to 3.8 million. Now, believe it or not, that position size, when we did that analysis, was 19% of a diversified portfolio.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
So I want to hop in and look at the chart super quick, guys. Not much really has changed since the last time I spoke about this, but again, we did get sort of stomped out. You see, we had a lot of this volume range profile right here. It also coincided with this downwards pressure. So again, when you have a massive move like this, you're not going to break right through the resistances immediately. In fact, there's a potential chance that we might even go a little bit lower. That's not out of the cards, but as long as you don't lose the major market structure, and I am paying attention, by the way, to this market cipher indicator down here. I want to see what this wave ends up doing. I want to see how deep this comes, and if we can get some kind of a connection that shows a continuation, it could be setting up for another potential move to the upside. Now, I did have this broken down right here. This was to go in a bit of an example. So basically, all of these green lines represent the tops, all of these orange represent the bottom, and all of these purple lines represent how long it took Bitcoin to get back to the previous all-time high. And again, just showing you how crazy this gets when you go essentially from the bottom right here. So this is going back to January of 2015, and we go all the way to the top. So again, this is on the monthly, so the days are going to be a little bit off. I'm not going to have the exact number, but I thought the monthly chart was clearer. You could see this was 1,065 days, okay? And then if we go and we look at the next bottom to the top, that lasted 166. So again, we're in that 165, 166 range. And, you know, the big question is, since we had that bottom from the FTX crash, if we go all the way across here, we're now again at the 165. So this is exactly where the 4-year cycle supposedly should be ending, right? And what's interesting is if we look at the length of the bear markets, at least to the bottom, not the full bear, you have about 365 days. Right here, you have about 365 days again. So if today was to mark the end of the bull, then you would be looking at a bottom around pretty much a year from today, right? What's interesting though, and I'm going to talk more about this, but what's interesting is if you look at the time that it takes to recover actually to the previous all-time high, you'll notice that that is also something very interesting worth noting. So right here, you have about 1,158 days, right? The next time we have to recover is only about 1,000. The next time that you have to recover, okay, is only about 820. So it's almost like it's going down about 200 days each time, which means that Bitcoin is actually recovering faster than normal. So if this was the top, hypothetically, I don't even know why I'm making this video. I'm just kind of want to just, I don't know. Let's just talk about this possibility. You know, that would say that Bitcoin would be in a bear market, essentially wouldn't see prices like this again until about July of 2027, okay? So that's all that, right? Now, but I just want to show you a difference. Look at all of these previous cycle tops, okay? Do you see this Bollinger Band, what I have under here, these green arrows? Look at how, if I get rid of all this, okay? You see this top right here? Look at how deep that Bollinger Band was at this top right here, okay? Look at how deep this Bollinger Band was at this top right here. Look at how tight this Bollinger Band is at this potential top here. So again, even just on the charts, you can go by just the fact that it's been 4 years, but if you literally look at what the charts are showing you, they're showing you something more like here and here and here, right? Not here or here. So again, when I look at these charts, I don't see the same types of moves that we saw here where you have the 21 exponential crossing over. We don't have that. In fact, we had a perfect wick off of the 50 and support on the 21. So I mean, we had worse. This was worse back here than over here, right? I mean, look at this. Look at how long we stayed down here. We fell below it and we sat on that 50 for multiple weeks, okay? So what we're seeing right now is actually not that bad. It just seems terrible because of the liquidations. We still are above all of the CMA ribbon. And, you know, people say, well, what if we fall lower? What if we fall out of it? Well, we still have this trend line back here. We're way off this trend line. So if Bitcoin was to fall down, let's just say we nuked today. Absolutely nuked, okay? 93,481 and Bitcoin would still be in a constructive uptrend. So there's a lot to go before you can start saying that we're in a bear market. If you want to be the guy to just call the top, maybe you'll get it right. But if you're looking at the charts, that's not what we're seeing. I mean, even if you switch this to the Heikin Ashi, you know, look at these parabolic runs that you get into the tops of these areas where we get these major resistances. Look at all these green Heikin Ashis. These are the average, right? So you're seeing averages of massive green. Same here. Even this top right here, massive, massive run up. This is not really, I mean, look at it. This is very choppy. This is very up and down. This is not reminiscent of what we would see. In fact, this move right here, where Bitcoin got to about 108, that looked more like a potential top than what we have right here, right? I mean, the only thing that you have maybe is that you have these giant wicks to the downside and to the upside. So yeah, you do have a potential tweezer top, depending on how you look at it, if you switch it back to whatever. But again, I'm just not seeing it. And even on the Heikin Ashi, we're holding above the long-term trend. This long-term trend that's held us down every single time, we're holding above that right now at around $113,400, right? And our long-term cycle indicator is still showing us that we're only about 80%-ish of the way to the top. So again, could this change? Yes, but I just wanted to break it down for you guys what I'm looking at. I'm just letting you know, hey, today's the end of the 4-year cycle. So if you believe in that and you want to sell. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I just think that we have seen a lot of things that have never happened before, both to the good and to the bad, right? We saw Bitcoin fall below the 200 weekly moving average last bear. We never saw that before. And that was bad to the downside. So why couldn't you see a difference to the upside? If we can do something we've never seen before in a bear market, then why can't we do something that we've never seen before in a bull market? It's just something to think about. And I do think that is a very different game this time around. So ultimately, guys, that's where I'm going to leave you at today. Again, if you guys do want to trade, do be careful with the leverage. Obviously, use smaller portions. Do not go all in. Do not use your whole net worth, right? It's gambling. When you're using leverage, you're gambling, right? Because all it takes is President Trump to come out and say one thing, and look what happened. I couldn't have expected that. You couldn't have expected that. I didn't see that in a chart. Right? So keep that in mind. But if you guys do want to trade, I do still have the bonus going on for Femex. You do have extra rewards you can get and VIP trial for up to a month. And of course, guys, Levex, one of the first exchanges to reach out and actually start reimbursing their traders. You got to give them respect. They're still a bit of an early exchange, but they're definitely proving their worth. So definitely check that out if you guys are interested. And also Blowfin, by the way, side note, a lot of people don't know this, but Blowfin is one of the very few exchanges that does not actually use Binance for their, market making, etc. So they have some stuff going on as well. And actually, it looks like this just ended. Oops. Well, I guess yesterday it ended, guys. You could have won an iPhone. But anyway, I guess we'll just stop the video here. But that's all I wanted to say. I basically just wanted to let you guys know that I don't see what other people are seeing. It doesn't mean that we can't go down. We do have that CME futures gap at 91,000. And there could be a wick down to that. Remember, we were saying around 93.5. So if you went to 91 and then wicked up and closed, you'd bang that out of the way. You'd still be holding up structure. Of course, we'd be below $100,000. That would freak a lot of people out. They would think it was all over. I just wouldn't be buying it though. So no, I would be buying it. I mean, I wouldn't be buying the narrative. I'd be buying the coin. So anyway, I will leave it at that, guys. You do what you want. It is your money. It is your future. If you think it's like I said, I'm not going to say that the 4-year cycle is going to play out. And even if we do go down for a week or two, a lot of people are going to be bragging about how they called the top. I wouldn't get too cocky too soon until we have some massive, massive confirmation on some of these legacy indicators, moving averages, or just something that represents some form of overexuberance, overbought top for Bitcoin. So until then, guys, I got these tutorials popping up right here, right now. Stay crypto, and of course, peace out.